Ahoy! Today we're talking about Morgan Le Fays again, because as it turns out, she will actually be a mage, a mid mage, but not quite the normal mid mage as well. To find out what exactly that means, we'll have to look into the closer look. Before we do that, a quick reminder that there's a gem sale at the moment, and if you want to buy some gems and support me, there's an affiliate link down below, or on Epic you can use the code SLOTH. And now let's jump into the post. Who is Morgan Le Fays? Arthurian legends tell of an enchantress. In the older text, she's the Queen of Avalon, a healer and ally to many. However, as those tales were told throughout different times and places, the enchantress became more and more sinister. Morgan Le Fays is an expert of dark magic and a rival of Arthur. She originally studied under Merlin and even was a member of the Pendragon family by some accounts. However, as her powers grew, so did her desire for control. She turned against the family, and through the use of magic that could manipulate one's body and mind, she became a fearsome enemy who could slay any knight. Morgan Le Fays has been watching as Arthur and Merlin rise among the ranks of the Olympians, and she is not about to let them gain more followers without a challenge. Our vision. Morgan Le Fays can have a wide variety of depictions and motivations, ranging from altruistic good to cruel evil. Her more benevolent representations tend to come from earlier Welsh mythologies, similar to earlier depictions of Merlin. The English texts that are best known as the official source of Arthurian legend show the depiction of her that is much more commonly featured in modern artistic media, and one we expect SMITE players to be much more familiar with. Core themes. Theme: dark magic. She etches powerful sigils to inflict pain and suffering on her enemies. She can summon dark entities and warp the mind. Visuals. Royalty and power. She is elegant and dignified. Her armor is finely crafted and she wields a sword as a magical conduit, symbolic to a rivalry with Arthur. Personality. Cunning and vengeful. She would just as happily win a battle through a conversation than fighting. She doesn't need magic to sow distrust and win her way. Perspective. Mystery. The other gods would see Morgan as an enemy, but Merlin's and Arthur's loss of composure around her has done more harm than she has. She doesn't seem to be out for violence, but the gods don't know who to trust. Morgan Le Fays has two goals: to rise to power and see Arthur and Merlin disgraced. A storm is raging from the clash between Tiamat and Gilgamesh, and the gods are more cautious than ever. When she arrives, Merlin and Arthur can hardly contain their rage, showing the gods they too have the same flaws as King Gilgamesh, the same flaws that angered Tiamat. After dealing such a hefty blow to the Arthurian duo's reputation, she slinks away to converse with Tiamat directly. These two goddesses are destined to help each other. Tiamat's only fear is the Olympians uniting against her, and Morgan would love nothing more than to see them all at each other's throats. Artistic process. The name Morgan Le Fays often conjures an image in people's minds. One that was wearing cloth and uses a staff or some sort of focus orb as a way to conjure her magic. These options felt disappointingly stereotypical to our team. We set out from the get-go to portray her with a twist: heavier armor and a magical sword. In her mythology, there is a story where she conspired to steal Excalibur, wield it against Arthur himself and defeat him. So we felt especially comfortable leaning into this idea of a sword-wielding mage. We tried a variety of clothing options as well as different shapes and sizes for the sword. Almost all of them featured the heavier armor set. A cloth and leather option were also included, but upon seeing them in person, the team's love for the armored version only grew stronger. Her sword would be the evil twin of Excalibur, so it needed to be impressive and complementary to her visual design. The armor was fine-tuned to complement this weapon and to display her themes of magic, royalty, and battle readiness, without making her feel like a tank. Morgan Le Fays will be sporting slightly higher base HP and physical protection than a usual ranged mage, but will be less equipped for the solo or duo lane than the usual mages who flex into these positions. So at this point we have a mention of the role, and I think this is very interesting. I did speculate towards the end of the last video that she might be a tanky mage of some sorts with unusual stats and effect, but I didn't expect this at all. I didn't expect her to be designed for mid lane, but with higher base HP and with higher physical protection. Which honestly feels a little bit strange to me, given that your opponent in mid lane at least will typically be a magical character, but obviously magical defense scales differently for both tanks and mages in SMITE, so I guess that's why they went with extra physical defense. So this is a little bit odd, but let's go to the rest of the article and the abilities to see if it all makes a little bit more sense after that. The result felt like a queen dressed for battle, ready to face her foes head on. After a few more iterations, we arrived at the final product. It should be noted that although Morgan takes a more stoic pose in these concepts, her use of the sword includes much more movement and magic in the game. This magic blade floats behind her as if in an invisible sheath and is able to be summoned to her hands in the blink of an eye to aid in her spellcasting. This part makes me very, very happy because I said I was hoping that we would see that floating aspect in game that they showed in the trailer, and that actually seems to be the case. Morgan Le Fays is a mage designed for the mid lane. She focuses on ranged damage, and her kit rewards the hitting of opponents with as many different types of magic as possible. She is generally immobile, so positioning is important, although she does have a few tricks up her sleeve if enemies get close. Unique gameplay features. A magic sword that floats or can be wielded by hand and has multiple different empowering states, creating a weapon worthy of standing against Excalibur, as well as a unique animation set for the goddess. A single ability that has 3 options for 3 different kinds of magic as a note to her studying with Merlin. Her magic types are Mind, Body and Soul. This is very likely ability 1 from the data mining because this had 3 different versions, A, B and C. And we'll actually get back to this Mind, Body and Soul part because my patrons actually found out some very interesting stuff about that. A new type of ability designed to punish guards who leap or dash without crippling them. No leap or dash of her own, nor shielding, but the ability to self-peel through multiple aggressive options, and of course lifesteal from items or some healing through specific ability hitting enemies. An interwoven passive involving marking opponents with various hexes, which consistently powers up Morgan. An ultimate ability which scales depending on the number of enemies afflicted by these hexes. A seemingly simple damaging ability, but one that uses a fully animated dark dragon to convey its new and uniquely shaped hit area. The time has come for the Dark Enchantress to grace the battleground with her presence. Will the guards be able to survive the onslaught of magic that is headed their way? Only those with the strongest resolve will be able to face Morgan Le Fays. So here's some interesting stuff that we can get from this. First of all, my theory based on the trailer was right, and her ultimate scales with the amount of enemies that she hits. Again, this makes sense because that seems to scale the size especially, which means in a 1v1 the hit size is smaller, it's a little bit harder to hit, but you're also only hitting a single target. But if you're fighting multiple enemies, then it gets easier to hit multiple of them. And we'll see a dragon in her abilities after all as well, which was something that I thought might not happen anymore, but they chose to not show that in the trailer. What I'm no longer sure about is if the runes that can be on your sword are directly the same as the hexes that affect the sword itself for the ultimate. And this is because there are 5 different runes on the sword. And Catherine, Zelaria and Eric's on my Discord did a little bit of digging on those. What Catherine found out is that 3 of these runes are the 3 primes, which are sulfur, mercury and salt. These all represent different things. Sulfur represents the soul, mercury represents the spirit, and salt represents the body. And Eric's pointed out that this links directly to this post because the ability with the 3 different options are the magic types Mind, Body and Soul. The other 2 symbols are distinctly different, with one of them representing the Philosopher's Stone and the other one potentially representing the moon or witches. We weren't quite sure on that one. But what this sounds like to me is that each individual ability and each form of that one ability is able to activate a different rune and not just hitting all 5 enemies. Since the closer look also describes that the hexes consistently power up Morgan, I would think that depending on which ability you use, or which form of the ability, you get a different buff to your basic attacks. And these buffs don't necessarily have to be linked to the ultimate. If that is the case, that would encourage switching between her different ability forms a lot, even if one is maybe otherwise not as rewarding for you. This would also mean that she doesn't actually have to wait until the teamfight phase to get the full effects. What we don't know is how her sword actually attacks. She is described as a Mid Mage with ranged abilities, but there's no word about her basic attacks. It would seem that based on everything else, her basic attacks would likely be ranged. And if that is the case, then I sincerely hope that they look significantly better than Freya's basic attacks. I think the whole shooting projectiles from a sword often looks weird unless it's some slashing element to it. This is also going to be very interesting insofar that she has a sword and apparently also, according to the data mining, has an ability that is buffed by more basic attacks, while apparently being a mid-mage, so I wonder if attack speed is something that will benefit her or not. So in response to the inevitable question if I'm disappointed that she's not an assassin despite getting that impression from her trailer and the earlier data mining, I think that is unfortunate because I think it's unfortunate we're getting another mage. But from the perspective of this character design by itself, I think she can still be a very interesting mage based on what we know so far. So from the angle of character design, I'm not upset. But I want to show you this real quick. These are the number of guards we have in each role corrected for magical assassins, magical hunters, and Erlang Shen, who I would say is more of an assassin than a warrior. As you can see, even after those corrections, we have 29 mages who are primarily designed for mid. We have 24 assassins and 24 hunters, the assassins primarily because 3 warriors were reclassified as assassins over time, and we have 17 warriors and 20 guardians. And if you were to cut it down to the guardians that are primarily supports, that niche would look even smaller. So I'm really not sure why Hi-Rez chose to give the double release to the mages this year, and also make it so that Tiamat is not viable in solo anymore, so she can't be a more flexible character. There's also something that makes the 3 next guard releases extremely messy in multiple ways, but that is something that we'll save for the next data mining. For now, I'm looking forward to see what they're going to do with Morgan Le Fays, and I'm especially interested in the anti-leap/dash measure, especially because I want to know how they want to counterbalance that against the Awilish one. There will be another video today where I show you some of the new skins. Keep in mind that this time the patch notes are split into 2 parts. I'm going to show you something about Morgan tomorrow for sure, but it might not just be a live reaction. So if you want to see that when it comes out, click a like and subscribe, or I will go to my garage, hide in the corner, stare at my home gym, and contemplate if it's harder for me to find the time to work out or for... Thanks to my patrons for making this video possible. That's That Nick Walker, Dwayne Brennan, Lanta25 Green, Zelaria, Zed the Undead, Nevitz Jr., Rawas, Angel, Z Feroli, and everyone else you see here who, again, helped me a lot with this video as well by digging deeper into the symbols.